Do you really believe that NASA shows you everything that happens in space? What if I told you that there was something orbiting the International Space Station, and that this something might not be human? NASA doesn't want you to see this, but today you will. In recent years, several signals captured by the space station's own live cameras have caught the attention of those who closely follow the agency's broadcasts. Unidentified objects, lights that appear and disappear in seconds, movements that defy the laws of physics. All this while NASA silences, cuts the signal, or simply ignores it. Coincidence? Or evidence that the truth is being hidden right before our eyes? This video is not about science fiction. It's about facts. Real facts captured by astronauts, by NASA's own cameras, by people who started asking questions and received silence in response. Why would the world's most powerful space agency avoid commenting on certain events in orbit? What is really being observed up there, so close to Earth? The International Space Station is a symbol of scientific advancement, global collaboration, and human presence in space. But what if she is also being watched, or worse, visited? Could it be possible that beings from another world have approached the ISS without the public being informed? What if the astronauts already knew, but couldn't talk about it? We are not here to confirm. We're here to show you what was captured. To analyze the images, the reports, the sudden cuts in NASA transmissions. To ask what has never been answered. And invite you to reflect. Why so much secrecy? You will now see images that circulated on the internet, videos that were quickly deleted, reports that never reached the mainstream media. Get ready. Because what you're about to watch could completely change your perception of the human, and maybe not so human presence in Earth's orbit. And if you think you've seen it all, wait until you find out what comes next. Over the next few minutes, you will be exposed to images and information that they rarely stay in the air for long. Videos that were removed without explanation. Broadcasts that went off the air exactly at the moment when something inexplicable approached the International Space Station. Coincidence? Or censorship disguised as technical maintenance? The truth is that NASA filters more than you might think. And this is not a conspiracy theory. It is standard. A pattern of silence, of strategic cuts, of vague responses whenever the word UFO or orbital anomaly appears in public records. That's why it is essential that you are aware, informed, and connected to sources that dare to question. In the end, why does the largest space agency on the planet avoid this issue so much? If it was all just space junk or failed transmission, why shut down a live global display at the exact moment a foreign object enters the scene? This is where our mission comes in. Bring to light what has been silenced. Point out the questions that no one wants to answer. Expose the details that the mainstream media ignores. And for that, we need your help. If you value content that faces the mystery head-on, that investigates, in depth, and that isn't afraid to show what's behind the veil of space, leave your like right now. It helps this video reach more people who also deserve to know the truth. And subscribe to the channel, because this is just the beginning. What NASA hides does not fit into a single video. Activate the bell, because the next chapters could be even more disturbing. And yes, you need to see them before they disappear. Now, let's dive into the details that NASA itself would prefer you never find out. Since the International Space Station came into operation in 1998, countless manned missions have recorded more than simple scientific experiments. Over the years, astronauts of different nationalities have reported incidents that do not appear in official NASA reports. Small noises that came from outside the station's metallic structure, pulsating lights that appeared in the darkness of space and disappeared in a matter of seconds, objects that seemed to maneuver intelligently around the orbital module. All of these were reported, documented, and, in many cases, ignored. Or rather, stuffy. The space agency has always used technical explanations for these phenomena. light refraction, ice particles, interference in transmissions. But can everything really be reduced to errors of interpretation? Because when you start looking at the patterns, you realize that every time something weird appears on NASA cameras, there is a cut, a silence, a detour, and it doesn't happen once or twice. It always happens, as if there were an invisible information containment protocol, a hidden script to protect the official narrative that we are alone. In 2014, a live feed from the ISS was suddenly interrupted shortly after a luminous sphere appeared in the distance, moving against the station's natural orbit. In 2016, another NASA live stream was cut off as a disc-shaped object entered the camera frame. And in 2020, a video showing a sequence of lights moving in formation near the ISS went viral on the internet, but was quickly classified as fake, even though the video came directly from the agency's official feed. Curious, right? These spatial anomalies, as they prefer to call them, have become increasingly frequent in recent years. Independent experts, ufology enthusiasts, and even former NASA employees began to investigate these events. Many of these investigators believe that the International Space Station is being observed, not by governments or international adversaries, but by something much bigger, something that perhaps not even astronauts fully understand, but which, in their restrained looks and enigmatic statements, end up letting it slip that there is more between Earth and space than we can imagine. It is impossible to ignore that. Some of these reports come from sources with unquestionable credibility. A former NASA engineer stated in an interview that, during his years of work, he had access to images that never reached the public. He described metal structures approaching the station and, in some cases, parking just meters away. But according to him, the files were immediately classified and removed from open systems. His speech was muffled, his name almost forgotten, but the damage had already been done. The seed of doubt had been planted. Another point that few know. During certain ISS missions, astronauts were instructed to avoid commenting on unidentified objects in public communications. There are recordings in which you clearly hear the hesitation in words, the uncomfortable silence when something unusual appears. In one of the audios that became public through leaks, an astronaut says in a low voice, "It's there again, next to the solar antenna. But it's not trash, it's not ice, it's still..." And soon after, the broadcast changes channels. Now stop and think with me. Why is there such concern about something that, according to them, is just a natural phenomenon? If it was indeed a piece of ice, why so many sudden cuts? Why so much secrecy, and why do astronauts show so much tension in their informal reports? There is something that is not being told. And this information gap is exactly what leads us to distrust. The ISS is monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Hundreds of cameras capture everything. And yet, when mysterious events happen, the most important part of the recording is always missing. When lights appear, image quality drops. When an object appears, the signal is cut off. When a strange sound is picked up, it is never mentioned. The very way NASA handles these situations is what fuels suspicion. Because if there's nothing wrong, there shouldn't be anything to hide. What's more, in recent years, the agency has increased the number of delayed transmissions. Previously, most ISS lives were in real time. Today, much of it goes through security filters before reaching the public. This means someone is watching before you. Someone is deciding what you can and cannot see. Someone is controlling the narrative. But perhaps the most disturbing thing isn't even what was cut. That's what was missed. There are records of triangular objects, red lights pulsing in sequence, movements that completely ignore the known laws of physics. And there are also moments of absolute silence when everyone at the station seems to be waiting for something, as if they already know what is going to happen and how to act. And it is at this point that the big question arises. Is NASA hiding this from the population or just protecting something it cannot explain? How far does the control go over what is shown? And mainly, why does the public need to be kept in the dark? Now I want you to start questioning yourself. Are we really alone? Or could this unknown presence be closer than we imagine? The International Space Station may be serving as a kind of privileged observatory for intelligences that come from beyond Earth, or even as a silent point of contact between worlds, with so much evidence ignored. Reports silenced and transmissions mysteriously interrupted, doubt grows. And if you've made it this far, you're probably feeling it too. A discomfort, a feeling that they didn't tell everything. And that's why this content needs to be shared, discussed, and uncovered. Because while NASA maintains control of the narrative, we continue to search for the truth. And now, I want to hear you. Have you ever seen a live broadcast from the space station where something strange appeared? Comment below. I saw something on the ISS. Or, if you think that all this might have an explanation, right? Maybe it's just reflex. Let's get this debate moving. Your opinion is a fundamental part of this investigation, and when we start to look more closely at the accounts of the astronauts themselves, things become even more intriguing, because we are not talking about bloggers or conspiracy enthusiasts, but about highly trained professionals, aerospace engineers, internationally respected scientists, people who have gone through NASA's rigorous selection processes and who have had access to space like few others in the world. These individuals are not exaggerated, they are not illusions. And yet, some of them broke their silence, or at least let it slip, that they saw things that defy logical explanation in 2005. During an interview, Buzz Aldrin, the second man to set foot on the moon, stated bluntly, "I saw something I can't explain." He was referring to an object that accompanied the Apollo 11 capsule during part of its trajectory. NASA tried to hush up the statement, calling it a misunderstanding, but the damage was already done. Aldrin is no ordinary man. He carries decades of scientific credibility, and even though he tried to soften his words later, the phrase was forever marked in the collective imagination. Something I cannot explain. And Aldrin wasn't the only one. Other astronauts also left traces of discomfort in interviews and statements that slipped through the fingers of media censorship. A former NASA astronaut, whose name was withheld for security reasons, was heard in leaked audio saying, "I saw something that wasn't terrestrial, and I can't talk about it in public." His identity has been covered up, his voice distorted, but the content is undeniably strong. The question that remains is, what is so dangerous about this information, too? The point of demanding absolute silence from those who should be the first to tell us. During several International Space Station missions, there are records not only of visual objects, but of human reactions that deliver more than any camera could capture. In certain transmissions, astronauts change their expressions abruptly. When looking through the station's windows, the tone of voice changes. The tension in the air is noticeable, even without words, as if something was there, outside, and the simple presence of that thing was enough to completely alter the emotional state of whoever observes it. There are also reports of astronauts who, upon returning from their missions, experienced extensive periods of silence, avoided interviews, and distanced themselves from the public. Many associated this with the stress of space missions. But others, including some colleagues from NASA itself, have suggested that the real reason could be something much bigger: the psychological impact of having witnessed something inexplicable in space, something the agency's protocols were not prepared to handle, something that did not fit into any technical spreadsheet or official report. One of the most curious cases occurred in 2003, when a Russian astronaut, during a routine mission, claimed to have seen a structure with a geometric shape not compatible with any known satellite approaching the ISS, according to him. The object hovered for a few seconds and then disappeared at a speed that no terrestrial technology would be able to achieve. This information was initially ignored, but ended up being leaked by a Roscosmos employee years later. NASA, as always, did not comment. And this brings us to an even more delicate question. Are these astronauts being told not to talk? Is there a silent agreement among space agencies to keep this type of phenomenon out of public discussion? All. How can we justify to billions of people that beings from another world have already approached our orbital station, and perhaps even made visual contact with humans? NASA's protocol is clear. Any anomaly must be reported, documented, and technically analyzed. But what happens to that which escapes any technical analysis? What do you do when an astronaut says he saw something that doesn't reflect sunlight? That moves against the station's orbit, that changes shape or disappears before his eyes. The answer always seems to be the same: silence. But the truth? No. Matter how much they try to cover it up, slips through the cracks. And in times of the internet, a small leak can turn into a tsunami of speculation. There are videos where astronauts, in moments of apparent carelessness, mention invisible flight companions or silent visitors. Phrases thrown into the air, quickly cut by communications operators or followed by camera changes. Still, everything is recorded, and those who observe carefully can pick up the signs. One of the most emblematic episodes happened during a live broadcast by NASA itself, where two astronauts were carrying out a spacewalk. Deep inside, something began to move slowly, silently. A dark object with defined angles floating against the star field. The camera stays fixed for a few seconds and then, ... cut, blue screen. End of transmission. The official justification: technical problems. But anyone who watched it live knows that it wasn't just a technical problem. It was the kind of trouble they'd rather you never see. Most disturbingly, several of these videos, which were previously available in NASA's public archives, have been removed or replaced with edited versions. The justification: improve visual quality. But what really happened was the cleaning of compromising elements in some comparative images released by experts. It is possible to clearly see how certain objects have been softened, blurred, or even completely eliminated. This raises a serious suspicion. Could NASA itself be manipulating the content to prevent certain elements from being detected? Now, think with me. If all of this were just a collective illusion, if they were just reflections or camera distortions, why so much effort to hide it? Why not make the images available and allow the scientific community to debate freely? Why mute astronauts, cut broadcasts, and edit videos? The simple fact that there is a continuous attempt to control the narrative says a lot. And this is where your participation comes in. Yes, you are watching. What do you think about these reports? Could astronauts like Buzz Aldrin, who dedicated their lives to science and space exploration, really be lying? Do you believe that these visual and behavioral manifestations on the ISS could just be coincidence? Or are we facing something much bigger? Something that goes beyond our technological borders and challenges everything we know about life beyond Earth. If you've ever seen a video where something strange happened during a NASA broadcast, comment below. I saw it with my own eyes. Or if you believe there is a logical explanation, right? I think it could be Earth technology. Your opinion matters more than ever, and it helps keep this debate alive. If the reports from astronauts are enough to make us uneasy, what can we say about the countless images and videos that show unknown objects in the vicinity of the International Space Station? These records, many of which came directly from NASA's own cameras, feed a theory that, although still considered controversial, has gained strength in recent years. The International Space Station is being monitored, or even visited, by extraterrestrial intelligences. That's right, we're not just talking about distant lights or unexplained noises. We are talking about physical presence close to humanity's most advanced structure in Earth. Orbit. Several videos show what appears to be ships approaching the ISS, often remaining long enough to be recorded by more than one camera. These are objects that do not follow known movement patterns, which defy basic laws of Newtonian physics, such as instantaneous acceleration and sudden changes in direction. In one of these recordings, widely circulated in specialist forums and ufology communities, it is possible to see a silver sphere hovering near the station's solar panel. It does not move like a satellite. It does not shine like space debris reflecting light. And its trajectory does not correspond to any activity programmed by known space agencies. And when experts try to analyze this type of material, what they find is even more intriguing. North American ufologist Richard Dolan, for example, states that there is a clear pattern of surveillance being carried out by these supposed ships. According to him, we are not being attacked, but rather carefully observed. For Dolan, the International Space Station would be the ideal strategic point to monitor human behavior in space. After all, it is there where scientists live in zero gravity for months, conduct biological and technological experiments, and interact with global communication systems. A great dish for any civilization that wants to understand where we are going with our development, but Dolan is not alone in this line of thinking. A former United States Air Force officer who requested anonymity revealed in a leaked report that in 2012 a silence protocol was activated after the approach of a triangular-shaped object that was visible on the ISS cameras for almost 2 minutes. This object would have emitted electromagnetic signals captured by instruments on board the station, which raised suspicions that it was not mere space noise. According to him, there was a closed-door meeting between members of NASA and NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, to decide how to deal with what happened without causing public panic. Another case that cannot be ignored happened in 2015, when an allegedly leaked document from NASA itself circulated on specialized forums. The document, which was reportedly intercepted during a hacker attack, detailed internal procedures for dealing with unidentified orbital presences. In the text, there were sections that instructed operators to terminate the live transmission if any unregistered object appears close to the station, in order to avoid public misinterpretations. The veracity of the document has never been officially confirmed, but it contains technical details and internal protocols that only someone with in-depth knowledge of NASA's structure could have devised in addition to the videos and documents. There are reports from image analysis experts who detected subtle edits in the agency's public files. Blurred elements, removed sections, changes in brightness and contrast to disguise suspicious presences in the background. This raises the following question: why would the most advanced space agency in the world need to edit its images? If there is nothing unusual about them, why not just make the raw content available without filters? These edits, although subtle, when compared to previous versions of the same videos, make it clear that something has been changed. And we're not talking about technical glitches. We are talking about possible deliberate attempts to hide evidence. And this in itself is a very strong indication that the truth may be being carefully hidden from the general public. The theory that the ISS is observed by non-terrestrial civilizations also finds support in a curious trend: the increase in UFO sightings near the station whenever important events occur, such as crew changes or launches of new modules. It is as if these intelligences were interested in our advances, our changes, our way of occupying space. There are even those who say that the construction of the ISS itself was, in part, influenced by knowledge obtained in an unconventional way, which refers to the classic theory that NASA has extraterrestrial technology obtained in previous encounters. Like the Roswell incident, for example, another noteworthy point is NASA's absolute silence in the face of these reports. When questioned officially, the agency always responds with generic terms, such as atmospheric phenomena, optical artifacts, or electromagnetic interference. But there is never a public investigation. There is never a transparent pronouncement on the clearest videos. And this further fuels the suspicion that there is something much bigger being carefully kept away from the eyes of the world in recent years. With the popularization of live broadcasts and the increase in enthusiasts analyzing each frame of images from the ISS, it has become increasingly difficult to hide these phenomena. And perhaps for this reason, more broadcasts began to be recorded with delay, allowing cuts and censorship in real time before the public sees anything compromising. The excuse is always the same: technical adjustment, signal improvement, connection instability. But the systematic repetition of these cuts at precisely the most unusual moments is no longer convincing. Do you notice how everything seems to be carefully coordinated? A mix of institutional silence, evasive responses, edited images, and astronauts who speak in codes or refuse to comment. All of this makes up a scenario that fits perfectly with a theory that no longer seems so absurd: that there are intelligences watching every step we take in space, and that these visits have already happened more than once. And the most curious thing is that, even with all this movement, the mainstream media continues to ignore the issue. While billions of people watch reality shows and sports competitions, up there, right above our heads, a possible revolution in the history of humanity is underway. And only a few are paying attention. Few are asking the right questions. Even fewer are willing to face the possible answers. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think about this theory? Do you believe that the ISS has already been visited by ships of non-terrestrial origin? Have you seen any of these images we show here? Comment below. They are watching. Or, if you think this is all just wild imagination, right? Conventional explanations exist. And of course, if you have a link, print, or video you saw about this, share it. Let's put this puzzle together. If the theory that the International Space Station was once monitored by non-human intelligences seems extreme at first glance, everything changes when we start to analyze the evidence that comes directly from NASA's own archives. And this is where the mystery gains strength. We're talking about actual footage, either live-streamed or archived in the space agency's public databases, that shows what can only be described as unexplained visual abnormalities. Objects hovering around the station, unidentified, luminous, shapes and movements that simply defy the conventional logic of physics as we know it. These records are not theories. These are not stories told on obscure internet forums. There are videos and images captured by the cameras installed on the space station, broadcast live on NASA TV, and stored in its file systems. And the most curious thing, whenever one of these phenomena appears, the sequence is almost always the same: interference in the signal, abrupt interruption of the live broadcast, and total silence on official channels. An emblematic example happened in October 2016 during a live broadcast from the ISS. A luminous point began to move slowly in the upper right corner of the screen. The camera, which usually maintains static focus for long periods, remained fixed for a few seconds while the object increased in brightness and slightly changed direction. Then the video froze for 2 seconds, and then the transmission cut out. In place of the image, a blue screen with the message loss of signal. When the live broadcast returned, the camera was already positioned at another angle, and the mysterious object had disappeared. Coincidence? Perhaps. But it's always in the moment exactly in which something unusual happens that cuts occur. These cuts are so recurrent that the ufologist community has already dubbed this pattern blue screen protocol. A reference to the blue screen displayed when NASA interrupts a live broadcast. The protocol, although not officially recognized, is known among those who monitor real-time transmissions. Several videos that circulated on YouTube and specialized forums were taken down due to copyright allegations, even though they were public recordings of the agency's own broadcasts. Why is there such an interest in deleting videos that, at first glance, don't show anything much? In addition to the images, there are audio records even more disturbing. In a mission recorded in 2013, 2 astronauts were communicating their position during a spacewalk. In the middle of the dialogue, one of them interrupts the sentence, says something inaudible, and the transmission suffers a sudden audio failure. When the sound returns, the tone of voice is different, more tense, as if something was before them but could not be mentioned. Audio from this broadcast circulated for months until it was removed from NASA's official servers. Fortunately, attentive users managed to make copies, which are still circulated among independent researchers today. This type of sound interruption has also happened on other occasions, always involving moments of visual anomalies in the images. The combination of cut sound, paused video, and changes in astronaut behavior is a constant that cannot be ignored. There are sections in which electromagnetic interference is clearly heard. That static noise typical of transmissions interrupted by a high-energy field, followed by garbled sentences as if something had been suppressed in the editing. And this raises a new question. Would the station's systems be suffering interference caused by these presences? Or could it be NASA's own control system activating filters and censorship commands in real time? Another recording that gained notoriety occurred in 2019 during a live broadcast in which the ISS camera focused on the curvature of the Earth. 3 bright dots moving in triangular formation. The movement was fluid, synchronized, and not consistent with known space debris or satellites. The video was quickly cut, but enough for thousands of viewers to catch the snippet and start spreading the word. The behavior of the lights was abnormal. Instead of following their natural orbit, they made gentle curves, slowed down, and appeared to interact with each other. This alone eliminates simple explanations such as solar flare, space debris, or optical interference. And when images don't crop, NASA often responds with vague explanations. On one occasion, when asked by email about a cylindrical object visible during a transmission from the ISS, a spokesperson simply said that the camera may have captured a dirty lens or ice particles, but the object in question changed direction and reflected light in an intelligent way, characteristics that no random particle would present. The official response only reinforced the suspicion that there is a deliberate effort to minimize or discredit any record that gets out of control. It is also worth remembering that not all of this evidence comes from abroad. In 2020, internal NASA video was leaked showing broadcast operators discussing what appeared to be a coordinated motion anomaly near the station. The voices were distorted to preserve identities. But the content was clear. The technicians themselves were surprised by the behavior of something they couldn't identify. And at the end of the conversation, a voice states, "Let's redirect the camera. The audience doesn't need to see this." This phrase has become a symbol of everything we are discussing here. The pattern is too clear to ignore. Visual anomalies always followed by cuts. Transmissions interrupted at the most sensitive moments. Censored audio. Evasive answers. And when all this is gathered and analyzed carefully, the scenario emerges clearly. Something is being hidden from the public, and that something appears to orbit the ISS with a disturbing frequency. Now tell me, have you seen any of these videos that disappeared from the air? Have you ever watched a NASA broadcast that was suddenly cut off right when something strange appeared? Comment below. I saw the live being cut off. Or if you think there could still be technical explanations for all this, comment. I want to see more proof. Your participation in this debate is more important than you might think. Faced with all these images, interrupted audio recordings, videos archived and then removed, it is natural that questions will arise from the public. After all, how does an agency like NASA, with all its protocols, cutting-edge technology, and commitment to science, react to such thought-provoking evidence? The agency's official response has been, over the years, practically the same: ice. Particles, reflections of sunlight on the station's panels, atmospheric distortions, or even space debris. These are the terms most used to justify the unidentified objects that appear in transmissions from the International Space Station. The scientific explanation is presented clearly and objectively. Ice particles are common in space, especially when the station releases water, oxygen, or other waste that crystallizes and floats around the structure. Reflections are also a reality in environments with intense light and direct exposure to the sun, and, of course, with thousands of satellites and fragments orbiting the planet. Space debris is a constant presence in the vicinity of the ISS. This all seems to make sense, and it does. To a point, the problem begins when we analyze these justifications in light of the concrete evidence we have already presented. A reflection does not change direction abruptly. An ice particle does not hover motionless next to a module emitting a pulsating light. And space junk, however chaotic it may be, does not align in triangular formation, moving synchronously around the station. These behaviors completely deviate from the expected pattern. And, more than that, they are ignored in official responses. NASA never specifically comments on the most compromising videos. When pressed, it responds with generic texts that do not apply to the phenomenon analyzed. It's as if the space agency is satisfied with broad explanations that cover any situation without the need to investigate in depth. Is this science? Because real science doesn't avoid questions, it seeks answers. And in this case, what we see is a pattern of systematic denial, a kind of wall that prevents any investigative advancement beyond what is permitted. But the most worrying aspect of all, this is the behavior towards live broadcasts. If it really is about reflections or floating ice, why crop the image? Why end the live exactly at the moment the reflection appears on the screen? Why change the camera or insert a blue screen with the classic loss of signal message? Science should not be afraid to show reality. On the contrary, it should document, analyze, expose to the public, and allow the global community to participate in the investigation, and more. Why, over the years, has NASA reduced the time for real-time transmissions? In the past, we could watch hours of the ISS's view of Earth for hours on end. Today, these broadcasts are increasingly shorter, more edited, with more frequent technical cuts. In some cases, even archived images disappear from public platforms, being replaced by compressed versions that omit exactly the minutes where the anomalies occur. It doesn't seem like a coincidence. It seems like protocol. There are those who say that all this is done to avoid panic, that showing a possible extraterrestrial presence, without official confirmation, could cause social chaos or destabilize religious and political beliefs. But this justification is also somewhat convenient. After all, today's public is more prepared than ever to deal with complex information. Films, documentaries, series, and digital content have opened up space for deep reflections on life beyond Earth. The question that arises is, why keep the mystery? If NASA, with all its credibility, claims that there is nothing unusual going on, why doesn't it allow independent scientists to analyze the raw data from the transmissions? Why don't you release the full audio, uncut? Why don't you invite experts from all over the world to openly analyze the records that so many have already witnessed live? The agency's resistance to openly discussing the most unusual phenomena only strengthens public distrust, and this stance creates exactly the kind of environment ripe for conspiracy theories. Instead of combating disinformation with transparency, it seems that the path adopted is the opposite, that of control, silence, systematic erasure. And this goes against everything science stands for. After all, is it more logical to believe that a pulsating light that changes direction is a solar reflection, or that it could be something completely different? Something that NASA itself still doesn't understand, or understands but doesn't want to reveal. The images don't lie, neither do the cuts. The sequence of events is clear. Anomaly appears. Signal fails. Object approaches, camera changes. Audio is interrupted. Astronaut is silent. This is repeated so often that it has ceased to be a technical standard and has become institutional behavior pattern. Therefore, it is important that we continue to question. Keep watching, keep documenting. Because if we rely solely on the official explanation, we will always hear the same words: reflection, ice, space debris. But the watchful eyes of thousands of people around the world have seen much more than that, and they keep watching. Now I want to hear from you. Do these NASA explanations really convince you? Do you believe that ice particles can make intelligence movements in space? Leave it in the comments, reflex, or something else. Or if you've already noticed these cuts live and have questions, right? I saw it happen. Let's keep this debate alive. Because sometimes questioning is the only possible way to get closer to the truth. If otherworldly beings were once here observing the International Space Station, what does that really mean? The ISS is sold to the world as a scientific research laboratory, an achievement of humanity, a milestone in space engineering. But what if she's more than that? What if, in fact, it is serving as a showcase, a strategic point where we are monitored by non-human intelligences? It sounds like a fictional script, but the patterns are real. Objects appear. Transmissions drop. Astronauts change their behavior live. And when questions arise, NASA responds with silence or the same excuses: reflection, ice, space debris. But none of these explanations answers why these phenomena always happen at the exact moments when the world is watching. It's not a coincidence, it's standard. The space we believe we are exploring may not be as ours as we think. Perhaps we are not the pioneers, but the ones observed. And if these visitors pose no threat, then why hide their presence? Why so much caution? Why cut broadcasts, mute astronauts, edit videos? If it were just a natural phenomenon, everything would be open to debate. But what we see is the opposite: secrecy, control, and censorship. The question that bothers us most is, are we ready for the truth? Or rather, has someone decided that we are not? Because if we confirm that we are already observed by another form of life, that changes everything. Science changes, religion changes, history changes. What if the ISS is, in fact, a kind of contact point? What if, without us knowing, there has already been a silent relationship going on for years? In this case, we're not just talking about mystery, we're talking about something much bigger. A secret that redefines human existence. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think the ISS really represents? Comment below. The ISS is more than it seems. Or, if you still have questions, right? I need to see more. Your comment helps this content reach more people and continue to reveal what's really happening above our heads. And after everything you've seen and heard so far, tell me sincerely, do you really believe that NASA is being completely transparent? Because, let's face it, the evidence speaks too loudly. There are video cuts always at the most critical moments. Unidentified objects with intelligent behavior, interrupted audio, visibly uncomfortable astronauts, archived images that mysteriously disappear. All of this forms a puzzle that, when put together, reveals something unsettling. We're not talking about loose theories. We're talking about repetitive patterns of a hidden narrative that is unfolding before our eyes, or rather, between the lines of what they let us see. The International Space Station may well be more than just a laboratory. It could be the silent center of something most people can't even imagine. And if that's true, why hide? I want to extend an invitation. To you, comment below what you think has happened up there. Do you think NASA has ever had contact with something that cannot be explained? Do you believe that there is intelligent life watching our steps outside the Earth's atmosphere? Or do you think all this can still have a logical explanation? Right. Your vision here? And if you've ever seen something strange on a live broadcast from the ISS, comment, "I saw it with my own eyes." If this video moved you, if at any point you stopped and thought that makes sense, so you need to be here with us. This channel is the space where the truth finds those who have the courage to question it. And if you've made it this far, it's because you're exactly that kind of person. Someone who does not accept shallow explanations. Someone who looks for what's behind what they show us, then do the following. Subscribe to the channel now, activate the bell, and join this community that is opening your eyes to what is really happening up there. Here, you will see what NASA doesn't want you to see. You will hear what they avoid saying. You will discover documents, images, and truths that do not appear in the news. If you believe that there is still a lot to be revealed, the journey is just beginning.